From Moment to Movement with Tamara Banks has been made possible through the generous support of the Anchor Point Foundation, helping nonprofit organizations and leaders creatively solve problems in their communities around the world.
Racism is steeped into the very core of this country. And now, in 2020, Black voices are tired of being ignored, muffled, and killed. Millions of Americans are demonstrating, protesting to make their voices heard, especially Black Americans. A movement has to arise from the ashes of the moment. From Moment to Movement is a series of one-on-one truth-telling conversations with the Black community, aimed at working towards addressing police brutality and changing systemic racism.
Our guest is Dr. Joy DeGruy. She has a master's in social work, clinical psychology, and a PhD in research. She's also the author of Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome. Dr. DeGruy, thank you so much for joining us. So great to have you.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be here.
So let me just start with, when I heard the title of this book, I thought, okay, this really speaks to what I think I've felt and believed and tried to explain to people for many years, and that when I hear particularly white folks, but also Black people will say, well, why can't Black people just know who they are and get it together? Well, if for generations your family has been torn from the motherland, your language has been destroyed, your culture has been destroyed, even to the point where your color of your skin and the texture of your hair is a bad thing, and all your rituals and practices have been taken away, well, no wonder. And so that what your book, I think, takes it even a step further, that this pain and trauma from 300, 400 years ago is still prevalent in our DNA. Am I kind of close on that thought?
Yeah, kind of close. And it's kind of, I think the biggest problem with looking at historical trauma is the fact that we look at it as historical. The problem is, not only did we experience hundreds of years of severe trauma, rape, beating, experimentation, mutilation, being bred, all of those things we experienced. But there's kind of a mythology that when slavery ended, the playing field got leveled. And what happened after slavery ended was more trauma. It was different and it was oppressive. It went through Jim Crow. It went through, if you've ever been, and it's not a pleasant experience, but an important one, the lynching memorial, or the memorial of that has been erected in Montgomery, that is really honoring the lives of 4,400 people. Those are the names that they had of people that were lynched. When it didn't stop, is my point. It didn't stop the injury. And my issue is, we never have had a collective moment in history to heal, to even acknowledge the injuries. So it's beyond the epidermis. And now with new information around epigenetics, we know that trauma is associated with markers on the DNA. So yeah, it's here. And more importantly, we have been able to thrive and to be more than resilient, to do all of those things in spite of that. But the injury still lingers, and that's something that we have to look at. In my work's about healing.
Talk about what that looks like, but that injury, does that show up?
It shows up in some of the ways that you've already mentioned. The fact that we are still denigrating how we look, the color of our skin. And what bothered me about this is, I have grandchildren. And my grandchildren were talking about an online platform, the light skin, dark skin club, and all of that stuff is still there because we've never intentionally leaned in, done the deep dive, and basically took the poison from the cookies. In other words, taken from the parts of our culture that are rich and build resilience and self-awareness, but to tear away from that some of those adaptive behaviors that we've carried along with us through the years. Something is like, children should be seen and not heard. Who is seen and not heard? Someone enslaved is certainly seen and not heard. Children have to be able to engage. People who've been told, again, he was really, really good looking, even though, he was dark skinned. Those are comments that are made in contemporary society, even in some of the rap songs. So we're looking at teasing that poison out of the culture, the rich, strong culture that we have, teasing out some of those behaviors that are being perpetuated because people don't know or understand how and why they're there. So I believe that when people know better, they can do better.
Right. And you raise an interesting point about understanding why certain practices or certain things are still done today. And one of your lectures I watched was really interesting when you compared a white mom and a black mom. And the black mom says to the white mom, oh, your little Joey's doing really well. And the mom continues to go on bragging, and the family is so blah, 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 blah. But when the white mom says to the black mother, hey, your little, Jackie or Jamal or whatever is doing great too, she's, oh, but he's a handful. Well, he gets on my last nerve. And then my immediate thing is, well, why can't you celebrate your son? But there's a reason for that. Can you explain to us what that is?
So one of the things that I did in my research, because my area of expertise as a clinician is violence and trauma. I mean, that's not necessarily what I wanted to look at, but it's what I did for a number of years. And in that research, I read a lot of historical accounts, meaning I read a lot of slave narratives. I read a lot. I talked a lot with elders. And when I was reading about this, I was, trying to get a grip on it. I started reading some things from slave narratives that one of the things that would happen if we moved that scene that you just talked about of the two mothers, let's move it back a couple hundred years. So now you have a black mother who's likely enslaved, and so also are her children. And then you have the white mother who is likely the slave owner, but most certainly not enslaved. And let's say that black mother that you were speaking about is, I don't know, working in the fields, and not uncommon for small black children to be playing nearby. And let's say the white slave owner, male or female, come through and see this black mother and notice her child. And they then says to that black mother, wow, that's your son. That's your boy there, huh? Wow, he's sure coming along. He sure is coming along. Now, what is that black mother going to say? She's going to say, no, he's not. He's stupid. He can't work because I don't want you to sell him. So I denigrate him to protect him. And that is an appropriate way of adapting when one is in a hostile environment. And the issue is because people have constantly told black folks, get over it. Well, we need to examine what you're telling me to get over, because there's poison in the cookies. And so we never examined those behaviors, and inadvertently we passed it along through generations, normalizing that behavior and then calling it cultural. So again, there's so many of those folded in our behavior. Everything, I always say, from what we eat to what we believe it means to be a friend or a mother or a father, are all tinged by this history, past and present. And so we have to be deliberate and intentional about what we are saying and what we are teaching children. Not only children, but what we are calling upon in terms of people being accountable as adults. So when I hear people saying things that, where they're really, really denigrating their children, I don't break into a professor's perspective of post-traumatic, but I start to talk a little bit about that and say, yeah, you know what? I know you're proud, and it's really okay to be. He's a wonderful, and of course, all kids have issues, but I find a way to bring the conversation to a positive place. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And without sort of punishing the parent, but also educating, informing the parent about why you're doing this, because they're probably just emulating what was done to them and how they were raised.
Exactly.
It's so interesting, the issue of, you talked earlier about light skin, dark skin, and just color in general. And you had mentioned, and again, I've just been studying them, just love your work. I'm a groupie, sorry. You're talking about a movie that you really enjoyed, and we just saw it last week, King Kong. And for the sheer special effects alone, just amazing. That's why my husband, a movie buff, wanted me to watch it, because I'm a journalist, filmmaker, da da da. And when I saw all those people. I was feeling a certain kind of way. Do I like the fact that they have white people dressed up as black people and black people as black people? They're all savage. Like that alone was something I'm still trying to process. But I really think it's important for you, if you would share your conversation with a young white boy, his father, about the black people in the movie, and the scariest part there.
So what happened was a real friend of mine, Dennis Stafford. We went, and I'm almost certain we were in Ohio. I can't remember, but we were going to the first day of the opening of King Kong, and I was going to see it exactly why you were, for the cinematography. I knew they were going to, they had the Jurassic parts and all this. So anyway, I go into the theater. I had no idea that the movie was like 3 hours, right? So I had to go to the bathroom. So I'm trying to figure out, when am I going to dash off to the bathroom? So there was a Jurassic bug scene, right? And I don't like little bugs. I certainly don't like big ones. So I ran out. As I'm running out, there's a young white man, maybe in his 40s or so, and he has a son, and they're both running out. And I'm going, boy, that was a horrible thing. He goes, yeah, that scene must be the worst part of the whole movie so far. So he runs into the bathroom, and the son stops and goes, I didn't like those black people. It was like, I was like, whoa. And then he runs into the bathroom. And then I'm like, why me? Because why does it happen to me? I'm just going to the movie. You know what I mean? So I get back in the theater, and Dennis looks at me, he goes, what happened? So I explain to him, and he goes, only you, Joy. This only happens to you. And he says, so, well, you got to just let it go. I said, but the problem I had was the fact that this little white boy could not discern the fact that these weren't black people. Again, there was no way in the world they were going to show all black people in savage cannibal people. They're not going to do that. So they zoomed in, and you saw there were Asians. One of the main characters had blue eyes, just to let you know that they were, I don't know why they were all painted kind of black. But again, anybody who's an adult knows and can see that those are a variety of people, because that certainly wouldn't have gone over well. Mm-hmm. But the little boy couldn't. And so Dennis is saying, get over it, because it's like 3 theaters worth of you're not going to be able to resolve this. So when we come out of the theater and all the droves of people are coming out, who do I see leaning on the rail is this man and his son. And so Dennis looks at me and he goes, no way. I said, yeah, way. So I walk over to the man, and he's actually leaning there waiting for his daughter, because she's now in the bathroom. So they're waiting for her to come out. And when we came out, I said to him, I walked over to him, I said, do you remember me? He said, yeah, you ran out during the bug scene. I said, yes. I said, do you mind if I asked your son a question? He says, no, not at all. So I say to his son, now that you've seen the whole film, because King Kong bites it in the end. I mean, that's pretty bad. I'm right. Like, now that you've seen the whole film, what do you think the worst part of the film was for you now? And he goes, those black people. So his father looks at me like, well, I and I said, no. I said, don't worry. I know your son is not a Nazi. That's not what this is about. I said, my concern was that he could not differentiate. And now he has the monster are these people. And I said, and I said, that concerns me, that, and then he looks at me, this man looks at me, he says, I don't know. This is a problem that I don't know that we can ever make right. That's what he says. I don't know. But now we're having another conversation. Now we're talking about a bigger issue. And he says, right. I don't know if we can ever make this problem right. And I said, I have to hope that we can. And so his daughter runs out, and they begin to walk towards the escalator. And he stops, and he turns around, he comes back to me, and he says, but I will make it right with them. I will make it right. And it was just a moment. It was a moment. It's chilling. Even now when I say it, I can remember that was an exchange of heart. That was an exchange that said, I recognize my lane here in what I have to do, and I'm going to make that right. And I think that's what we all have to do. We all have to. This is not anything that any individual or group. This is a collective healing that must happen. And I am encouraged by the fact that the world has joined us in this hope. as much as we fumble through it, and as much as we struggle and we have different views within cultures outside, we don't all have to agree, but we have to agree on one fundamental truth, and that is that everyone is noble and everyone has the right to be treated with respect and dignity. We don't have to earn that. That is something
Right.
we were born deserving.
Absolutely. Let me just fast forward to 2020, or even really the past, I don't know, Rodney King, do we start there? But let's talk about that little boy who was so frightened by the Black people in the movie, becomes a police officer. And now he's on the streets to serve and protect the community. And some members of the community look different than him. How does that kind of, or does that kind of mentality as a young child, being sort of programmed to be afraid of the Blackness, carry on into our adult life, and how that impacts Black people?
What a wonderful question that is. That's something that we've been grappling with, my folks in my organization, my company, and everywhere I go. For years, I worked directly with police officers. I trained police officers in terms of looking at exactly what we're talking about. What we understand is there is bias, right? But what we don't understand is the etiology of that. So if we look at this little boy, is entering an academy, the police academy, and he's entering an institution with that at its root, fundamentally at its root, is white supremacy. That's what people don't understand. People keep going, how can we fix it? How can we get it back? Every system is perfectly designed to get the results it does, to actually create. It's designed that way. The problem is that we don't understand how policing started. So policing in America, in this country, the foundation of it were slave patrols. That's where policing came from. And the slave patrols were terrorist organizations. They terrorized Black people because of a pathological fear that white people had that we would do to them what they did to us. And so as a result, we've been terrorized ever since that time. Now, here's the good news, because there's some good news to this. The fact that, he is entering this academy, and the police academy isn't the only one. Every major institution in America has been governed by white supremacy. And I'm not saying that metaphorically. That's a reality. So if we try to unpack this and say, what can we do? They actually have been able to impact bias, a variety of things. And matter of fact, I have a theory that even what we're doing here, virtual, people who are coming together virtually, who would not ordinarily be virtually together, that is actually diminishing bias. I really believe that. Somebody's going to test it. Anybody hear me? Test it. So what we do know is that you literally can reduce bias. They've done it 40% by creating scenarios. So they actually had police officers look at scenarios and where the white person is the villain and they're saved by a Black person. They personally are saved by the Black person. And by the end of this, I don't know, maybe hour long, they actually can reduce bias by 40%. Virtual reality can do it even more. So now let's unpack what that is. What that means is for this little boy that grew up, that has now been indoctrinated in this system that is poison at its roots. He has to really pull himself out of that in order to be effective in his job. If we really pull this out and really look at it, what are we really talking about? We're talking about people engaging with people. Because you see, we destroy the myth when we come together, when you engage with me, when you know me as a whole person, when you break bread with me, when you know my family, then all of a sudden those myths about how dangerous and scary and violent and angry, those go away in the face of truth. And so long as we can keep people divided, as long as we can keep people separated, we can continue the lie and create the hysteria and all the fear.
That's right.
So you see what I'm saying? So what happens is to this little boy, I'm sorry, all of us are. Because in a recent study, they did a recent study of teachers, something like 135 teachers, preschool. These are preschool teachers. And they wanted to, and this is the Yale Child Study, this was done in 2016. They wanted to determine what teachers did when they believed there was a problem behavior. So they let them see these videos and they told them, please identify any potential problem behavior. Well, there was no problem behavior in any of the scenarios. But what they did was they used eye scan technology to see where they looked when they expected a problem. And they looked more at children of color and specifically more at Black boys.
Wow.
So they looked at the trajectory of their gaze. And so what we have to appreciate about these 130 teachers or however many there were, was they weren't all white teachers. Okay.
Right.
We're all programmed and trained and socialized to look at that little Black boy.
Mm-hmm.
They even looked at teachers where they had two children off task, a Black child and a white child, doing the same off task behavior, and the teacher only sees the Black child.
Wow.
So
that's fascinating and scary at the same time.
Yes, deep. These are the things we have to begin to look at and deal with.
So I would love to keep you for hours and hours, but we just don't have that kind of time. So in the meantime, let me ask you what we want people to be able to watch this, and we don't just want to preach to the choir, so to speak, because we all know what we all say. So we're hoping people who don't look like us watch this show and learn some things, and we want to provide resources and maybe literature for people to get acquainted and have maybe some intellectual and intelligent, thoughtful, sensitive, discerning conversations. And so to help people get to that point, can you recommend a couple of maybe reading items that folks should? 12 million books.
Well, what I would do is which would make it a little easier. If you go to my website, joydegruy.com, I have a suggested reading list. Mm-hmm. And it's broad, but I mean, you look at it. Also, it's suggested film to look at. A more recent film, and I'm going to send this if you have not seen the trailer for it, is called Invisible Portraits, which is a wonderful, wonderful. It's on Vimeo right now. We just did it, just filmed it. I'm part of it, and I'm not saying it because I'm part of it. It is just really, it's about Black women, and it's about us really claiming our voices, and it's a wonderful film. But it's among the films on my suggested film list. The other thing that I would say too is that, for people to find their own lane, do what you need to do and what you can do from your space. Every Wednesday, I have something called Wellness Wednesday, which streams on Facebook. Also, Joy DeGruy Publications, that's where you can find it streaming. And you can actually go look at all the different titles. And we've dealt with everything. We've brought Black children on, we've brought Black men, we've brought other people of color. I brought on attorneys. We talked about Karen needs to go to jail. That was one of the titles. And we have now the Karen Act, which is wonderful because people are going to be held accountable for lying and putting people's lives in danger. Anyway, so if you can always just look, and I did that. We created Wellness Wednesdays as a result of COVID because we wanted to reach in and talk to people and reach people that aren't going to go to, the school or the university, that aren't going to go to even my talk if I'm doing a talk or don't have access. I wanted to be able to stream live, real life conversations with real life people who are dealing with all of the things that all of us are dealing with, hence the reason why we're doing it this way. So again, you can go on. That's one of the things that I'm doing to try to give to the community, the broader community, not just even in the United States, from all over the world. I also have an online course that I teach. There's two. One is an advanced course and one is an introductory course. Both of them, one's 10 weeks, the other's 5. We're in the 5-week one now. But all of these things, and to educate yourself by engaging with people, and also to reach out to your friends and family, really important for mental health. There's a lot of depression, sadness, anxiety going on, and we need to touch people in the best way that we can. That's right.
Absolutely. And not just because we're social distancing doesn't mean we have to distance ourselves from caring for one another.
Right.
So Dr. Joy DeGruy, thank you so much for joining us. It was a pleasure, and really enjoy your work. And I hope you stay safe and healthy out there. And I hope you join us again.
And same to you. Thank you so much.
You bet. And thank you all for watching. If you want more information about this show, just go to pbs12.org. I'm Tamara Banks, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.
From Moment to Movement with Tamara Banks has been made possible through the generous support of the Anchor Point Foundation, helping nonprofit organizations and leaders creatively solve problems in their communities around the world.